if you wanted to make $100,000 and you row cropped, you'd need like 100 acres. If you market gardened, you'd need about 1 acre. And some guys do a lot more than that on 1 acre. If you have a high tunnel, you need one 3,000 square foot high tunnel, and you can do about $100,000 in gross sales.
You're listening to How I Grow This, exploring stories of gardeners from across the globe as we learn from their biggest tips and tricks to some of the things not to do. I'm your host, Luke Hammond. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the How I Grow This podcast. I'm your host, Luke Hammond. I am so excited to be here with my friend, Sean Pessara of The Mindful Farmer. And if you're new to the show, make sure you, first of all, like and subscribe. And secondly, you're going to be in for a treat. What we do in the How I Grow This podcast is we kind of walk through how people grow what they grow. And for Sean, we are going to go into a little bit of a deeper conversation, maybe about his story, and just learn all the different ways that kind of led him up to the systems that he uses now. And additionally, a little bit of the philosophy and the why, because, Sean is known as the Mindful Farmer. And that's where I'm going to open it up. So Sean, welcome to the How I Grow This podcast.
Hey, Luke, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. Well, I want to open up this question with the Mindful Farmer. What brought on the Mindful name, and kind of what were you seeing in the gardening space or the small market farm space that led you to kind of coining that as your banner and the flag that you're flying?
Yeah. So actually, we started off as Mindful Honey, as a beekeeping company in Texas. And then as we moved to Arkansas and we started the new business of farm supply and garden supply, we adopted Mindful Farmer, and my wife is Mindful Kitchen. And we came to Mindful Honey actually through a conversation with a friend. That mindfulness is often viewed as like a spiritual practice, which I was actually unaware of. I was thinking it more of an intellectual practice of thoughtfully considering all the actions we do. So in the beekeeping world, I wanted to thoughtfully consider how we were raising our bees and how we were working alongside the farmers we were partnering with. Why were we doing certain things? People would, if you get into farming, people say, you need to put down triple 13. You need to, there's a way to do things. And my kind of approach is to question everything, and to look for how it impacts not just the health of the honeybees, but also, is this a sustainable way of raising honeybees or running a farm or raising livestock that's also attractive to the next generation of farmers? So it really comes from thoughtfully considering the whole picture and producing a product that is healthy, not only for the plant or the bee or the cow or the pig or whatever, but also for the person who produces it, the person that consumes it, and the environment. So that mindfulness, it can be a spiritual practice. For us, it's more on the intellectual side of thoughtfully considering all the elements that go into our business, and then the impacts that resonate out from that.
That makes a lot of sense. And, as a super novice beekeeper myself, I'm thinking of you creating this mindful honey and going into this approach into raising bees. Were you seeing a lot going on in the honey space that made you want to consciously go, hey, we got to rethink this? And then how did you choose to rethink it and raise your bees?
Yeah. So when I started, we were in South Texas, and there's a lot of migratory beekeepers. So people moving hives to California for almonds and things like that. And in that space, there's a lot of commercial treatment. It was also around the time when there were a lot of high profile cases of honey smuggling, where honey was coming in from other countries where they were using prohibited antibiotics, and they were changing labels and smuggling it in, undercutting the market and selling something that was potentially harmful. And so I was kind of like, I don't want to do any of that. How do I raise honeybees in a way that creates a healthy product, doesn't require, chemical and antibiotic inputs, and also works collaboratively with my local farm. So I'm not against migratory beekeeping. What But when you get to certain scales of it, it can be detrimental to the bees that you're moving them such great distances that there's not additional forage. So once that one crop is done, there's nothing for them to forage on. So I partnered with a few orchards in Texas that were not spraying Roundup. They weren't spraying the trees. They were doing things certified naturally grown or organic. And so it was just a great opportunity to collaborate with them and find a way to keep bees and do so in a way that doesn't require a lot of the conventional routes that were basically I was told that I have to do if I want to keep bees alive, sort of thing. So, and then what was also cool is I partnered that with a bee removal service. So in Texas, the bees, especially in Houston, were everywhere. Like they'd move into people's homes and sheds. And so I could rescue the bees and then take them out to the farm, utilize them. And so the bees didn't die. They went to work pollinating food for people. So it was a cool kind of like full circle opportunity.
I think that's super cool. First of all, the thought, seeing the challenge and the problem in a space and then trying to provide a good solution. When you start looking, I know this is not a beekeeping episode. We just kind of went a little squirrel and rabbit hole here. But we'll bring it back around. Don't you worry. There's a lot of tension between the styles of just raising bees. One between the Langstroth, which is what people typically see, where there's a specific hive frame. That I'm kind of talking about it for people who don't keep bees, but it's the boxes you see that are stacked up. And then there's another style, which is a horizontal, where you stack your frames lengthwise in a hive, and it's a horizontal hive. And they're two polarizing views of keeping bees, and some people are very, very strong opinionated on which style is more natural and healthy, and it's probably getting into the nuance of what you're talking about. But which style did you do to raise bees semi-commercially or commercially? And is there pros and cons there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've done almost every type of hive there is. So I've done the horizontal top bar hives. I actually have plans that we're working on that we'll put on our website so that people can download, get local wood, and be able to make their own top bar beehive really affordably. So we'll have those on this summer. Those are really great. They're really easy. If you're looking to make a livelihood, it's a little more challenging because you don't get the yields you'd need. With the Langstroths, you can get higher yields, but it's also more equipment and more expensive. When I was doing the bee removals, what I saw was just like bees can live in almost anything. And so it's more about the genetics and their ability to fend off pests and disease and handle climate change, climate shifts and local weather extremes. The biggest thing that is the threat to the bees, like I said, you almost you could put them in an old refrigerator if you wanted to, is the change in forage that has happened over the past, probably since World War II. Honey yields have just gone steadily down since World War II, and it has to do with where we've lost native prairie. People are keeping their yards mowed. They're not growing as many native plants that produce nectar. It's more ornamentals that are sterile and don't produce nectar and pollen. So that's a big issue facing honeybees, more so than what sort of equipment you decide to put them into. And that, kind of talking about mindful farming, like that's taking that holistic approach to what benefits the whole environment and the person that produces it and the animal. That was one of the things we did when we moved our bees onto a farm, is we immediately start putting in like wildflowers, taking out invasives, to where we're creating a not only good home for them in that little farm, but those wildflowers are going to go to seed and hopefully land in the ditch in the next farm, kind of continue to spread. So that was our approach, is a holistic approach to raising bees. But yeah, you can put them in almost anything.
Gotcha. So let's go into the vegetable side. Most people listening to this are gardeners, at least at different levels, and they want to know how you grow what you grow. Let's talk about your kind of transition into the vegetable space from the mindful honey, and you kind of adopted this. What really got you into growing veg?
Yeah. So I've always enjoyed vegetable garden for over 15 years, and then wanting to transition into sustainable agriculture. I was working as an environmental scientist, had the beekeeping business on the side. I had the opportunity to move to Arkansas and work with Heifer International on um, doing some basically farm consulting for specialty crop growers or vegetable growers. So I had vegetable growing experience and I had agricultural business experience, and then got to kind of uh, work with growers on that side of things. And for people that are interested in growing for market, I think that's ultimately the biggest challenge is running a garden or a farm as a business and the business side. And now that I have my own, business and we're trying to grow, like the actual growing vegetables seems easy compared to hiring people and making sure you're keeping track of expenses and you can account for sudden climate issues or I'm sorry, weather extremes, or sudden government shutdown or whatever. Like that becomes the difficult part. Making sure you can cash flow the whole operation in the when things slow down. Marketing plans like that. That's the really challenging part. So I got to work on that side, and really just have always loved vegetable production. Honey is great, but it's a luxury item. Like you could do without it, but you need produce. And so I really enjoyed working with all the vegetable farmers. And as I consulted, I saw 30, 40 different farms doing it 30, 40 different ways. And then had the opportunity with Heifer to start a commercial organic vegetable farm on the property. And we sold mostly wholesale. Um, and that was what really was like a big learning opportunity for me as a grower to now take what I'd seen over the past year of 40 farmers growing things 40 different ways and then create a farm that I felt like best performed for what we were trying to accomplish. So growing organically and then being able to meet the needs of the market without competing with other farmers. So I was looking at what specific crops can we grow that help the restaurant who can't get it locally, but doesn't compete with a local farm that's also trying to scale and sell to that same restaurant. So it was a hard puzzle to solve of how do we operate profitably without competing with other farmers and do it organically in rural Arkansas. But that kind of difficult puzzle to work on, I think, made me the farmer I am, and then also gave me the opportunity to see that if we want to grow this whole local food movement, especially like across the Southeast, where there's so much opportunity, we've got a warm climate, fertile soil, and water. Um, it's going to take some, there's some knowledge gaps to fill, and then there's input issues. So whenever I was running the farm, almost everything I needed to supply that farm had to come from out of state. So we're paying thousands of dollars in shipping costs just to get potting soil and fertilizer, uh, high tunnels and irrigation supplies and all that sort of stuff. And so if we really want that movement to take hold across the southeast of the U.S., I wanted to step in and help our Arkansas growers to be able to get those supplies a lot more affordably and save not only on the product, but then also especially on the shipping and not have to be so much out of pocket. And if that's, if that small farms can save a few $1,000, they can put that towards the tractor or the walk-in cooler and be able to scale their operation. So that's ultimately the bigger goal and kind of the holistic, mindful approach of considering all the different impacts of what we're doing is we want to see all ships rise. And so that's the main motivator.
So I want to kind of begin to start at the beginning and scratch under the surface of budget, because you talked about business and the importance of figuring out all the number side of farming. And I think there's different scales of what people have. And you said different farmers do 30, they farm in 30 different ways, and there's no one size, program. I think if there was any program that has been systematized and designed and kind of melted down for somebody to follow a proven plan, it would be JM Fortier and the market gardener. That he's really kind of really shifted the industry to go, hey, think walk behind tractor, think minimal tillage, think 100-foot bed, systematized to where everything is the same, and the way you cut it. Everything performs here on this side of the farm as it does over here because everything's uniform.
Yeah.
He really helped bring that down for small scale folks. If somebody has a piece of a pie and that pie is their budget, if you're going to build a garden in the backyard and you have $1,000 to spend, where should you put your investment?
It's a great question. So I think to like throw a bunch of numbers at you, but like kind of help scale it down to where we're at. I tell people that if you wanted to make $100,000 and you row cropped, you'd need like 100 acres. If you market gardened, you'd need about 1 acre. And some guys do a lot more than that on 1 acre. If you have a high tunnel, you need one 3,000 square foot high tunnel, and you could do about $100,000 in gross sales. On the livestock side, almost 75% of their yearly expenses are inputs, especially if you're like feeding chickens. And the vegetable side, it's labor. And so what's interesting, like what you brought up about John Martin, is a lot of people think the future of humanity is all these technology advances and hydroponic indoor, whatever. But at the end of the day, like it's still just really efficient human-based systems that don't require a lot of financial input. You don't need to buy a lot of stuff to get started. And if you can create good systems, you can outperform any robot or whatever like that, because humans are just good problem solvers, and we can roll with sudden changes, which is what farming's what you have to deal with as a farmer. So in that backyard system, if you just had $1,000 to get started, I'd probably think with as few crops as possible to get started. Mainly like greens, like Curtis Stone was a farmer up in Canada, and that was one of the ways he just basically borrowed backyard space from neighbors and put in some raised beds and started growing salad radishes, lettuce greens, and maybe some herbs and stuff like that, like high value crops per pound. And that's how you can maximize your small space. The way that helped me kind of think about it is if I was advising someone who's interested in starting and growing for market, I'd have them think about the income that they want to take home at the end of the day, and then figure out how big you actually need to build that farm in order to achieve that income. So instead of saying, "Oh, I've got 2 acres, I'm gonna start growing stuff and see where I get," I'd start off with, "Okay, let me see how much I want to make. What can I sell? What can I sell it for? And now how much space will that require? Do I need to hire anybody else to help me do that?" And so if you have 1 acre, you can fit 100 100-foot beds in an acre, roughly. And so if you can gross $1,000 off of each bed per year, then that's $100,000. And so maybe 25,000 goes to your rent and your inputs and paying off your walk-in cooler and stuff like that. Maybe 25,000 goes to hiring someone to help you, and then you take home 50,000. That might be a good, like really rough back of the napkin kind of example. And then as you can multi-crop and intercrop, and especially if you're in a warmer climate, you can harvest throughout the year. Now all of a sudden that revenue goes up, as does your expenses, because you're buying more seeds and buying more fertilizer, and probably need to hire a second person or a third person. But then you can add high tunnels, and then high tunnels will dramatically increase that input or that gross revenue per acre. Now you need to hire more people. So it is a bit of like a game of staying ahead of your overhead and your expenses. But that's, I feel like something that was just kind of real easy. 100 foot beds. How do I hit $1,000 per bed? That gives me $100,000 per acre. Then you're off to the races. You can start building your farm plan around that. So for us, like when I was managing the farm, I managed that organic farm for 5 years. I never once grew sweet corn, okra. I think maybe we did zucchini one year for like a CSA to help kind of round out their CSA. But I was really trying to do heirloom tomatoes. We did a lot of slicers, organic strawberries, a lot of herbs, a lot of greens, and then a ton of root crops.
Uh-huh.
So we're trying to keep that uh, um, profitability per acre above that $1 uh,
Uh-huh.
or the sorry the $1,000 per bed. And so you can even break that down into like per square foot. What kind of revenue do I need to have per square foot? And if you grow cabbage and it's a lot less, like it's, maybe 30 cents a square foot and you need it to be at $2 a square foot, well, then maybe your crop rotation or the math works out to where you follow cabbage with bell peppers or cucumbers, and then you bring that number back up. And
Uh-huh.
so that was a really helpful way for me to work my farm plan to figure out how I got to my gross revenue goals that I was trying to hit in order to pay all of our bills, pay all of our people, and be able to have money at the end of the day. Because that's also, again, going back to the beginning of the conversation, taking that holistic approach is, we want farming to be sustainable.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of times when people refer to that, they're talking about environmental sustainability, but also needs to be economically sustainable, not just to the
Uh-huh.
person who's doing it, to where I can actually pay my bills and get my tooth fixed or
Uh-huh.
whatever. But
Which you probably
also,
can't, you're not going to be able to do that no matter what job you have,
yeah,
right? With the
yeah,
medical system in America right now.
yeah, yeah. But being able to it be sustainable for me economically, but
Uh-huh.
also a sustainable by generation. Like it needs to be attractive enough that
Ah,
the kids want to do it.
there it is.
There's so many people that I talk to that like, it's really interesting because being in Arkansas, and I'm from Texas, but moved here, and I'll talk to people that like, I'm trying to save up to buy like our future farm, and uh, talking to families that are like, yeah, we got a farm, we got like 400 acres or 1,000 acres. And they talk about like, how I can't make any living on that. Can't make any money on that. Or, yeah, I left there to go to accounting school or whatever. And so even though like, to me, that's such an amazing asset, an opportunity to like grow your family's wealth, but for them, it almost feels like a burden.
Uh-huh.
And it's just a really odd thing. And I think because maybe the type of agriculture that their family was practicing wasn't done in such a way to make it attractive, both emotionally and time, and in terms of use of time, and economically, that the kids would want to keep going at that and building it. So it's just a real interesting thing I've observed since moving here, that people kind of like, oh yeah, we got a few hundred acres, such a burden kind of thing. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
Uh-huh.
And so I think, yeah, a lot of it has to do with just system. It's just how you utilize it. So, with that too, it's, farming is one of those things that's not for everybody. Um, it does require a lot of entrepreneurial skills and desire, people skills that have to be as strong um, as your growing skills and carpentry skills and electrical skills and plumbing
Uh-huh.
skills. There's really not many other occupations in the world that require so many different hats on the same person. So it's probably not for everybody. Um, and we had that conversation too with some apprentices at the farm of, hey, it may not be your goal to operate your own farm that requires certain skill sets, but we at least want to train the next group of people who could maybe work for another farmer who does have the entrepreneurial skill sets, that they're
Uh-huh.
going to need people that can come alongside them and work as well.
You started out at an acre with the 100-foot bed, and then you brought it down, you brought it down, you brought it down. You said, well, if you grow in a tunnel, if you grow in
Mm.
a high tunnel, that one high tunnel is going to produce as much as, and you had a number there. Um, let's talk about growing in a tunnel and why it's so much exponentially more um, productive. Let's use the term productive rather than just economics. Like, what is it about a tunnel that makes it so much more productive per square foot?
Yeah. Yes. So the tunnel is, we call it protected culture. It would be like the blanket term that you would include high tunnels and greenhouses and low tunnels and all this stuff. And you're essentially just providing protection for the plants. So in the immediate sense, you can protect them from hail and heavy winds that might, if you're growing cut flowers, that prevent the plants from falling over. So your losses are significantly less. When we were growing heirloom tomatoes, we would almost be able to harvest every single tomato and it would go to market. There were very few seconds
Mm-hmm.
No sun scald, no birds pecking at them. So your yield just by like not having seconds goes up tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
And then your season is also extended. So you might gain 3 to 4 weeks on both the front and the back end of your season where you can plant earlier and harvest later. So
Mm-hmm.
now you're literally just growing longer throughout the year. And then also your yield can increase. So you're able to keep plants at more of their optimal temperature and conditions. So plants have kind of a certain window. If it's below this temperature, tomatoes don't really want to grow. If it's above that temperature, maybe they don't want to set fruit. But now that I have this conditioned, or not conditioned, but protected space, I can put shade cloth on there and keep the temperature down in the summertime. So those tomatoes will keep setting fruit.
Mm-hmm.
I can keep it warmer in the spring so they'll get up to size a lot faster. And so the yield per plant goes up. So the
Mm-hmm.
yield goes up. I can grow it for longer, and there's less fruit that doesn't make the cut for market. And so in our 30 by 96 foot high tunnels, we do about 300 tomato plants. We'll prune each one to a double vine. And in a 3 month season on those heirloom tomatoes, we'll get maybe 10,000 pounds of tomatoes and then sell them for $2 a pound wholesale, organic heirloom tomatoes. And that's 20 grand in gross revenue on that one crop in the 3 month season. And then we can follow that with peppers and cucumbers, lettuce through the winter, and then start with some spring cut flowers, and then back to our rotation. So that's where like your revenue per square foot gets really high in those tunnels because you can just
Mm-hmm.
keep things going all year round.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the 2 liter system of tomatoes. You just kind of brought it up, and the advantages of doing that versus the simplicity of just allowing a single liter to grow up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what is the advantage of being a tomato decapitator?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a whole video on that on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
about cutting our tomato plants at the top. It only is going to be beneficial on your indeterminate tomatoes and particularly your greenhouse varieties. And so we cut the tops off our tomato plants, and right at the cotyledons, you'll have 2 new vines that'll come up. And so the benefit is that they're both equally growing at equal rate versus like letting a vine go and then trying to pull a sucker off. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
both be at the same height. And so it's just for uniformity when you're sending a team through
Mm-hmm.
to trellis and prune. Almost every vine across the whole high tunnel is all at the same height, so
Mm-hmm.
that nothing's going to get above each other, and then your working is your process is a lot more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really helps. And the
When
high
you,
tunnel too. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask a little bit on that. A lot of people ask the question, well, what about the fertility? Do you need additional fertility as you're still growing out more vine per
Mm-hmm.
plant? Do you
Yep.
need additional fertility? And then I'm trying to think of the other main question associated with it. Let's talk fertility first.
Yeah. So you do. If you're, I kind of see the soil as like a bank account. So if you're getting more yield out of it, you got to put more into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a consideration. And the high tunnel can be a little tricky because compost can be really high in salts. So you can't just dump a ton of compost in a high tunnel because there's no rainfall to wash excess salt out of the soil. So you
Mm-hmm.
really do need to keep track of soil tests, and guys that have really like farmers that really have it dialed in are doing tissue samples as well. So they might do um, a leaf sample and send that into a lab and figure out where the nutrients are, and then either do a foliar spray or a liquid feed or something like that to really keep everything dialed in for a long season.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important to know where your soil's at in terms of doing a soil test early in the spring. And then for really high yielding crops like the trellis tomatoes and greenhouse tomatoes, side dressing throughout the year is also really important. So we use and sell feather meal, blood meal as our organic fertilizers, mostly for nitrogen. Phosphorus, potassium don't typically have big swings, so it's more easy to dial those in. But if you get into the season, you can have kind of big fluctuations in nitrogen. So it's good to have something you can side dress with as the season moves on.
Mm. What kind of fluctuations are happening with the nitrogen, and what have you found between feather meal and blood meal that creates a nice slow release nitrogen?
Yeah, yeah. So they work really well together in kind of like a 1-2 punch, especially like in our seed starting mix. Blood meal is uh, plant available much faster. Bacteria break it down and release the nitrogen that's in the proteins and make it available to plants. In the feathers, it's bound up in a protein called keratin, and it takes longer for that bacteria and fungi to break down the nitrogen and make it plant available.
Mhm.
So it's really helpful to be able to add blood meal, instant feed. If you have some discoloration in the plants, that can really address it quickly. And the feather meal is more like long term, like it'll hit next month and the next month and the next month.
Mhm.
So those are really helpful for being able to address like a sudden change, and then also making sure you don't have a dip in the future by just having a constant long term supply.
What kind of rate do you recommend on that 1-2 punch of a feather meal and a blood meal? Are you recommend? Let's just go, since we've been doing the math based on 100 feet bed. That's probably 2.5 feet wide.
Yep.
That would be 250 square feet. What is a recommended rate for that one
Yeah.
two punch? How many pounds of a product? Yeah, let me really test your math skills here.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh gosh. Um, it's on the back of the bag. I can look it up.
Yeah, it's
I've
on the
done that
back of the
math.
bag. Are they
I want
talking?
to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It's like 5 pounds.
Okay, so if you're talking 5 pounds of an input on one single market gardener bed, that's 250 square feet, is almost
Mm.
the equivalent of the backyard garden.
Yeah.
Because the
Yep.
backyard garden is most likely going to be 4 to 8 raised beds that are
Hmm.
about 8 feet long, maybe 4 feet wide.
Yep.
And so that's 32 square feet. You know, three of those raised beds is about a market garden square foot.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so a lot of people are trying to figure out, like, how much product do I buy? Do I buy too much? Am I,
Mm.
and they get kind of confused pretty quickly. So I
Yeah.
think as simple as we can make that, about
Yeah.
5 pounds
Yeah.
is.
We even do, I call it the backyard bundle or the homestead bundle.
Mm,
It's on our website, and and you can also get all these products through Seed Time as well. But it's, 10 pounds of feather meal, 10 pounds of azomite, which is a trace mineral,
mhm,
and then 10 pounds of worm castings, which we actually make a worm tea and then spray that foliarly on the plants. And
mhm,
so it's that whole bundle of like, here's, in our garden is 1,000 square feet, like in my home garden.
mhm,
And I just use that bundle each year, and it's all the fertility I need. And so like the feather meal, using 5 pounds, on that 100-foot bed, it's $15. And my goal is $1,000 worth of produce. So a $15 investment for $1,000 return is well worth it, you know?
mhm,
So that's, I think, where sometimes home gardeners, and homesteaders can get a bit in a bind. And, when I have people tell me how big their garden is and just how little they harvest it, I'm like, um, is it a systems issue, or is it maybe it's a fertility issue? And so I want to basically run all my plants like race cars. Like I want to have that soil just dialed in to where they can
mhm,
perform at the highest level, and be resistant to pest and disease and produce tons of fruit with very little um, effort and pampering. I've just got the soil
mhm,
there. I've got excess nitrogen in the form of my feather meal that they can utilize for several months as it breaks down. And I'm feeding the soil biology really well. I'm building organic matter.
mhm,
And so as I've done that, like in our home garden and what we did on the farm, now that we're, several years in, I don't have weeds. I don't have to worry about water. I think I watered 3 times last year
mm,
and just put like one sprinkler over the whole garden. I pulled up all my drip tape, because our plants just don't need it. Like there's enough organic matter. The soil has loosened over time. There's really deep roots that have run down several feet into the soil. And so when it does rain in the spring, it charges up my soil moisture. And so doing these organic practices, apart from, even if there were no health benefits, just the investing in the soil health long term has saved me so much effort and time.
mm,
Putting, maybe 20 minutes a day into the garden at the most. And last year I think we're about 2,000 pounds out of our square foot garden is what we're able to harvest of winter squash and sweet potatoes and tomatoes and peppers. And I don't grow 20 different things. We really just grow for like maximizing our grocery budget. And so
Mm,
things that can store, potatoes that don't have to be stored in a refrigerator, winter squash, and we can eat those almost year round. So those are things we focus on in our garden.
that's awesome. Let's talk about azomite. There's a lot of questions around it. Is it
Mhm.
really going to perform? What is it actually doing to the soil? What is it? First of
Yeah.
all, it's a weird word. Like, bless
Yeah.
you, like
Yeah.
azomite, so let's talk about azomite.
Yeah. So azomite is a product. It comes out of Utah, and it's it's from a deposit of volcanic ash. And the unique thing about this geologic formation is that it's unique. There's not many places in the world that have the same mineral composition. It's huge, so it'll last a long time, and it works really well for balancing highly weathered soils. So um, as soils get a lot of exposure to rain and the elements, especially if you're tilling a lot or you've brought in soil. So like both would be the case if you have a farm and you've done a lot of plowing and tilling. Um, that soil is becoming highly weathered. Or if you have, maybe you're in a subdivision and they brought in a bunch of fill material that doesn't have much topsoil in it, that's also not going to have a ton of the essential minerals that plants need.
Mm,
So what's unique about this formation of the ash is that it has all the essential nutrients that plants need from A to Z, which is why the geologists that discovered it called it azomite from A to Z.
mm,
Um, but they're in good proportions. So uh, not having heavy metals or high sodium, um, they're in healthy proportions for plants of soils that don't have the mineral composition that they need to for those plants to perform. And the other cool thing too is that we're actually even using it to supplement our chicken feed as well. So every time I put out a bag of feed for our chickens, I put out like about 2 cups of azomite, and they can pick through that just like a mineral lick for like livestock, and it has a healthy balance of trace minerals for the animals as well. So I can tell like whenever um, they have more access to forage. They hit the azomite a little bit less, but in the wintertime when there's less stuff blooming and
mhm.
flowering, they tend to pull on the azomite a bit more. So the animals have a good instinct for what minerals they need. And then you can use azomite in aquaculture as well. So it
Mm.
helps feed the microbes uh, in the water column, and has had like increases in um, output for like trout and catfish and stuff. The fish will actually grow faster with a little bit of trace minerals in the water, because it feeds the things that feeds the fish, which is pretty cool.
That's wild. Now, what would be the difference between azomite and like a humic acid? A lot of people are maybe familiar with humic acid and in that form, um,
Mhm.
which is also a mined product. Where do and there's a lot more mined products, langbonite and a whole bunch of other things. But um, what would be a key differentiating piece between humic acid and azomite? And if you had to choose one, what would you choose?
Yeah. So I think that the humic acid, you're going to have a lot of that in compost and organic matter as things decompose, and that's what helps create soil structure
Hmm.
and holds soil particles together. So you're providing a lot of that just in the decomposition of plants.
Hmm.
Um, with the azomite, it's a um, if you want it to get more nuanced. So like if you're a farmer and you're really dialing in specific things, like we're high on phosphorus, but we're low on boron, you can find mine products that are like just predominantly boron.
Hmm.
Um, there's 28 essential and probably closer to 75 different minerals that plants utilize. Azomite has a good distribution of all those. And so for the home gardener and homesteader, uh, I would say azomite is just, if you know that you have a little bit low in things like zinc or copper or boron, azomite can address all of those things.
Hmm.
But if you are dialing it in on the high level of market gardening, it's probably too broad, and you'd actually want to get something more specific to what you're trying to amend for.
Okay.
Um, so for us, it's like nitrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and then azomite is all of our micronutrients.
Hmm.
So trying to keep it simple for now. We'll probably add in some of those more individual nutrients in the future.
A lot of people have questions associated with how much should I put and how much is too much? Because,
Mhm.
in America, we often think if some of a good thing is good, then more is better. And
Yeah.
so, how do we break that down in the garden to maybe not just be out there spreading tonnage of azomite?
Yeah.
What's a good amount for people to be
Yeah.
putting out every
Yeah.
year?
So if you order from us, all the instructions are on the bag, where you can see that. Um, and what we tend to do is actually break up. Like if I know I need so much nitrogen or so much phosphorus or potassium or copper throughout the season, we dial back our application rate and then just apply it every time we plant, because we'll plant 3 or 4 times a season. So I take what I need for the year and then I divide it and then do smaller applications. That
Mhm.
also helps prevent over applicating, which could not so much for the case of like feather meal or azomite; those won't be toxic to the plant, but you could be over applying and like um, wasting product. And so I don't want to waste product, and I also don't want to have it like wash away. Like you put down a bunch of azomite, and then you have a heavy rainfall, and it just goes into the creek or something. Um, so I want to be a little more conservative on how I apply those things, and then I
Uh-huh.
can also take a soil test halfway through the season and see what my bank account is looking like. Have I
Mhm.
over applied, under applied? Keep doing the same regime, or not? So that's kind of our uh, the way that we apply is I'll do 2 soil tests a year in the
Mhm.
spring and then like early fall, and then I can tell if I need to re up or if I'm good for the season.
Gotcha. Since you just hit on it and you said spring and early fall, um, and you've kind of touched on timing, is there a good time to apply that product? Morning, evening, and then when in the spring and when in the fall are you trying to
Yeah.
get that uh, out there?
Yeah. So for sources of nitrogen, nitrogen is the most mobile of all the nutrients. It's really easy for a heavy rainfall to flush nitrogen out of the soil. Um, Whenever you get snowfall, it actually adds nitrogen to the soil. It just changes throughout the season. Um, but for a lot of minerals, they tend to be kind of locked in place. Um, they're held to clay particles, or they themselves are rocks that need to be weathered and broken down to make those minerals plant available. Um, so on the azomite, you don't tend to have like big swings, and application rate isn't as crucial. You could put it down in the winter time if you wanted to, and it's going to take a while for like the larger pieces to actually be broken down by the acids of the
Mhm.
plant and bacteria and make those nutrients available. For the feather meal, however, that's a lot more um, uh, season dependent. And what I typically do is I'll put down feather meal about a month before I transplant, and it takes about that long for the bacteria to start breaking down the feather meal to make it plant available. So in my seed starting Excel spreadsheet, I've got like my date for when I want to transplant, and that gives me it automatically populates a date a month ahead of that of when I need to prep my beds. And
Mhm.
so what's really helpful about that is that it allows me to, start, I'll broad fork, I'll add in my feather meal. The feather meal can start to decompose and become plant available for when I plant a month later. But also when I'm doing that, now all of a sudden the weeds are going to germinate. Well, now I've got a month to get all those weeds out of the way before I transplant. And then I'll transplant. My plants have the nitrogen they need, and there's no weeds for them to compete with, and they just take off. So that's been a cool strategy, where it's like, okay, how do we do this in a way that there's a synergy that actually saves us work in the future? We already need to
Mhm.
fertilize. Let's just fertilize a little bit early to where it's available right when the plants need it, and it gives us an opportunity to do weed control.
Man, I love that. I love it. Let's go and you just got through speaking for us at the Seed to Harvest Summit. And for those of you who missed the Seed to Harvest Summit, man, you you missed out on a ton. There was so much content, so many great speakers, so many people. We had a lot of people jump into that, and it was incredible. You were speaking specifically on soil blocking and soil growing mediums,
Mm.
um, basically choosing what to start your seeds in. Um, let's talk about. You talked about the benefits of soil blocking. Let's talk about the cons of soil blocking.
Mm.
Let's really break that down for people. What could be the cons of soil blocking compared to a more traditional cell tray or potting system?
Yeah, there are none. No, I'm just kidding. There are. I think getting for most people, especially if they're first starting, the cons, the drawbacks to soil blocking is getting your medium dialed in. So that's normally like 9 times out of 10, the first like season people are soil blocking. They're like, "Oh, my blocks fell apart, or they were too wet, or
Mhm,
they were too dry. I had a hard time watering them." But once you get it dialed in, it really becomes like you get a mix that works really well. We have a mix, but we also have like advice on making your own. If you have materials closer to you that you want to make it from, and that was what that whole segment was about. Was like finding a good mix. Um, and then getting the watering system worked well. So like we have plans for a wicking, self-wicking, or self-watering a wooden tray that we put all of our soil blocks on. And we've got
mhm,
free plans on our website on the resources page where you can download those and make those trays for super cheap. And the cool thing about that is like I can just put that wooden tray in a pan of water and I can go away for the week and the water just slowly wicks up through the wood and into the blocks and keeps them perfectly watered. It's usually whenever people are first starting where they're like, I'm squirt bottling every single soil block and this is taking too long and they're drying out or they're too wet. And it's just kind of finding your system that works for the soil blocks really well. And for us, the bottom watering with the wooden trays was the solved all those problems.
mhm,
The other thing that people can kind of run into is just the time involved to make the blocks.
mhm,
It can be a labor intensive process to make your blocks. Where I argue that you can also it can be a time saving kind of down the road. So like one of our soil blockers makes 35 blocks in
mhm,
about that big. And when I go to transplant, I can scoop up all 35 in one hand and then walk out and like transplant directly from them. So I'm holding 35 plants in one hand and I'm not having to pop them out of plastic trays. At the end of the season, I don't have stacks and stacks of plastic trays. So
mhm,
it's kind of like finding the balance of where do you get your pros to outweigh your cons. And so
mhm,
it will take you longer to make blocks than just filling a tray. And stateside, there's no machines that do it. So we have, mechanical soil blockers, but it's still all hand driven. In Europe, they've got big machines that'll like, you just, a front end loader will dump in several yards of soil and it just cranks out soil blocks on a tray like that
mhm,
fast.
mhm.
Um, there's not really any machines here in the US that do that. So
I know
that might
maybe
solve
a
the problem,
year a year or two
but
ago, I think Johnny's came out with at least a full like 10-20 flat,
yeah,
tabletop,
yeah.
um, unit. Um, that's it's a pretty penny price tag compared to some of the plastic trays that will last forever,
Mm,
or for a really long time if you care for them. Maybe not
mm.
forever. Forever in a landfill, but but so getting that mix right. There's a lot of recipes online.
Mm,
What suggestion of recipe would you shy away from? I know a lot of people add um, like lime or calcium products in it to get it to bind a little bit better.
mhm.
Some are peat materials, some are cocoa core materials, some are native soils or compost.
Yeah,
What? Let's talk a little bit and just kind of reiterate what we heard from that specifically to the how much moisture do you want in uh, that material as you're about to press it into a block, and
yeah,
what elements do you need to have?
yeah. That's really good. I think that the main, well, one material that makes it difficult is something that's real springy. So having too much coconut core can often be an issue. Coconut core kind of you compress it and it pops back. So whenever you compress it with the block and you lift up, it just kind of expands again.
Mhm,
Um, one thing that really helps is the humeric acids. Anything that has that greasy organic kind of texture. So worm castings, compost, those things are really good binders for holding the stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
Native soils, that's how really traditionally for thousands of years people would have propagated plants. They just take their soil and kind of compress it by hand. But when you do that, the clays kind of resist being wet again, so it's hard to water them, and it's also hard for those plants to breathe once you make a brick of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's balancing the things that hold it together with the things that bring in water and air.
Mm-hmm.
So having compost in it or worm castings not only helps provide the microbial activity that those plants are going to need, but also helps balance those two things. It'll hold it together, but it also absorbs water really well. So you could do peat, or you could do a peat substitute. I got a friend who just made one out of coconut coir recently, but he's like, yeah, I could tell like I needed to keep adding worm castings to it until it was sticky enough to hold together.
Gotcha. A lot of people are trying to move into the most natural and, low input as possible. Let's talk a little bit about crops that are really hard to germinate without some sort of starting growing medium, and crops that do really well in just direct seeding into your garden space.
Yeah.
What would you recommend not trying to transplant?
Yeah. So for us, like in the home garden and the market garden, we transplant literally everything except for carrots. Carrots is the only thing we don't, because they just have such a long taproot that develops so early. And so you want those long, straight carrots. So we direct seed carrots. You can direct seed radishes and beets and some other root crops and stuff too. But almost everything else, even sunflowers, we transplant. Because when we're growing sunflowers for market, we're trying to maximize that space. And if we transplant, we can harvest them within 3 weeks of transplanting. And every sunflower is $1.50 and onto the florist. And so we even found that made financial sense, was to transplant the sunflowers and stuff like that. But yeah, carrots can be tricky. There's some cut flowers too that just don't like their roots disturbed. One thing I will say though is that with the soil blocks, you tend to the roots are less disturbed because they're pruned on the edge of the soil block versus having to like tweezer them out of a plastic tray. They can get a little more disturbed and then stressed. There are trays that are like air pruning trays that are kind of have slots in the sides of each cell, and that will mimic a soil block and keep those roots from circling and having difficulty coming out of the tray.
All right, I got to share a story regarding carrots, since you brought up carrots and you were talking about it. I think a year ago, you were talking about a system for germinating carrots where you use a silage tarp to keep that moisture in. Because one of the challenges in deep summer when you're planting carrots for a fall crop is you lose moisture. Yep. And you talked about using a white side up silage tarp to germinate carrots. And so I was like, hey, you know what? I'll give it a whirl. And this is where context is so important. I was in, pretty, good elevation Arizona, so 3,600 feet. And I tried to germinate carrots under the silage tarp. And it happened that in their germination period, after it takes almost 14 days for a carrot to germinate. About, 4 to 5 days in, we had a big heat wave. And I don't know if I was gone or I couldn't do it, but those carrots, none of them germinated. It was way too hot under the white mat. And so I had to do a whole nother round. And so it was just an experience. But then I know I failed in there, but it was also like 100 and something temperature, triple digit plus. And I think that's where it just, even with the white side up, it didn't work. And so I'm not saying it's always the case, but if I'd planted probably 2 or 3 weeks later, it probably would have done well and I would have saved that moisture. Because the problem you have with carrots is keeping that seed that's really shallow, really moist through that
keeping
germination.
a crust from forming on it.
And so, all my second and third waves did fine. where I didn't silage tarp, but I
Mm-hmm.
used a ton more water to make it happen
Yeah.
on timers.
Yep.
So anyway, that was my little test. I wanted to try it, and now I'm gonna probably, go at it again and see if I can get it to to germinate well with.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That the other thing too that we did that was very successful, especially for our carrots and beets, is we primed the seeds, and that was there's not a lot of resources on it. Like I've researched it and tried to find resources on priming,
uh-huh,
and it's essentially like starting the germination process and then
uh-huh,
pausing it.
uh-huh,
And so I would soak our carrot seeds for about 14 hours in water and then let them dry out, bone dry, and then seed them. And then we're getting germination in like 4 days. Because that initial germination process starts when the seeds get wet, and then it pauses. And and you can even still like wait even like a few months to plant those seeds, but it's not advised to wait more than a year because
uh-huh,
they're less viable now that you've partially started the process of germination.
uh-huh,
But when we started priming seeds, like that was when our germination rates went like super high. And we were able to more perfectly space the carrots and space the beets to where
uh-huh.
we didn't have to thin. I could reliably count on the yield of every bed. So the priming, and then either the silage tarp or the watering method, to just like, we're just going to water it every day for 30 minutes and just keep the soil moist for the next
Mhm.
week until those carrots are up.
Yeah. And then depending on where you're at and the temperatures in the dry climate of Arizona, it may be more than just, once a day.
Yeah, it might be
It's
3 times a day.
it's like, yeah, three to four times a day, depending,
Yeah.
just to keep that moisture there.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Sean, I really want to dig into that the priming your seed conversation, because that is something that is used more and more and more in um, large scale agriculture, seed
Mhm.
coating, seed priming, seed treatments, because what people are seeing is the tremendous yield increase per plant when they're dealt with something at the seed level.
Mhm.
That start is so critical for the success of your garden. Um, have you done much experiment with not just the water, but treating the water with some sort of biological inoculant, or maybe AEA's product BioCoat Gold, as the dry powder form? Have you
Yeah.
experimented much with that?
Yeah. We, so worm castings has some good enzymes in it and some good bacteria, symbiotic bacteria and fungi that will inoculate the plants. So that's why we always put worm castings. But we also mix in a dried mycorrhizae that
Mhm,
we mix into our seed starting mix too. So we're trying to inoculate those plants. And I was sold on that whenever I was in an environmental science class, and we did a restoration type project on a toxic waste site. And we had to all go out there and get buckets of soil, and you were able to amend the soil in order to grow the most amount of biomass. And we seeded it with grass or something. Um, and so we're in a competition in the class of who could produce the biggest plants on the same nutrient devoid, contaminated, toxic soil.
that's fun.
Yeah, it was really cool. And so people had all these crazy ideas of what fertilizers and whatnot. And the group that did twice the yield of everybody else inoculated with mycorrhizae.
Mm,
Um, it's the fungus and bacteria in the soil that inhabit the roots of the plants that help expedite moving nutrients and water to the plant, and then the plant repays them by giving them excess sugars from photosynthesis. And so if you can start that relationship really early, those plants are so far ahead. They've got the right kinds of bacteria and fungus that they need for those exchanges to happen. And then it's also those bacteria that and the plant roots, but that secrete acids and help break down the minerals and make those plant available and into the water, and then they can take it up from the water and give it to the plant. Um, so yeah, I'm a huge believer that that's like in doing that treating, you could even do a mycorrhizae priming to where you've both inoculated and started the germination process and then direct seed them. So yeah, that's huge benefits. Once you have them in the soil and they're present in your soil, it's not as, I think, critical, like year over year. You've basically inoculated your soil. But if you're in a new space in particular, or you have struggled with yields in the past, like doing that inoculation is really helpful, I think.
What product do you recommend for doing that? Are all mycorrhiza products available, like the same or equal? I'm sure every manufacturer probably says that theirs is the best.
Yeah.
So which one should people lean towards?
I would say looking for one that has, a lot of times they'll list like their colony counts.
Mhm.
So that's like how many colony forming units, are inside a gram. So making sure that there's a lot of life in it. And then if there's a diverse list of species. So sometimes they'll say, we have this species, but if you can find one that has like 4 or 5, that's going to give you the best benefit. And then, I think, and then looking at reviews too of just how it performs. There's a lot of like liquid products. I tend to like the dry products because if I don't get to using it that year, typically it'll last over into another year.
Very cool. I love it. Do you have any last words for people that just of encouragement or trying to get them? How would you encourage a backyard grower or a small scale grower that may be interested in taking that next step, whatever that next step is? How would you encourage them?
Yeah. I'd say probably the best thing you can do is to spend time on other people's farms. And that can be a hard one sometimes. Like, some farmers don't want help because sometimes help can be not as helpful. You know what I mean? So finding the right farmer and also coming into it with the right attitude of like, I need to have a net positive benefit from this guy I want to learn from. And so I think that's important, but being able to like put yourself in that space, maybe it's an internship, an apprenticeship, just volunteering. That's that process that I learned from, of seeing the 30 farmers do it 30 different ways. That was really helpful. So I would find someone you could learn from for sure.
Awesome. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the How I Grow This podcast. Thank you for jumping into listening to my conversation with Sean Pessara with The Mindful Farmer. Make sure you check out his products. Go to his website, mindfulfarmer.com. I believe that's what it is, right?
Huh?
If not, it's the link below. He's really powerful on YouTube and social media, Facebook, Instagram. He's all over the place. Make sure you give him a like and subscribe, as well as like and subscribe to this show and share it with a friend. That means everything. That's how we market and can continue to do what we do. And for those who don't know, the How I Grow This podcast is a podcast of Seed Time. Make sure that you go and create your free account today if you don't have a Seed Time account. We just want to be there to support you in your growing and gardening journey. And we hope that today was a super huge help. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, man.
And thanks for staying tuned all the way to the end. We're so excited that you're here. And that probably means that you enjoyed what you heard. You found some value in it. If you could, go and share this with somebody that you know that really helps push it forward in the algorithm. Hit a like, a subscribe, hit a review. It makes all the difference for us. Thank you for listening to the How I Grow This podcast. And we are dedicated to bringing more of these stories to you to help you grow at the next level. We'll see you.